Part 2. The Will to Power in Nature. 1. The Mechanical Interpretation of the World. 618. Of all the interpretations of the world that have been tried so far, the mechanical one, today, seems conspicuously triumphant. Obviously, it has a good conscience on its side, and no one in the sciences has any faith in progress or hope for success, unless it is achieved with the aid of mechanical procedures. Everyone is familiar with these procedures. As far as possible, put reason and purpose out of play. Show that in the fullness of time, anything can become anything. Smile and gloat a little when, once again, the apparent intention behind the destiny of a plant or an egg yolk is traced to pressure and impact. In short, pay unreserved homage to the principle of greatest stupidity, if I may be permitted a facetious expression in so serious a matter. Meanwhile, a presentiment, an anxiety can be detected even among the best minds of the movement, as if the theory had a hole in it, which sooner or later will prove to be its last. I mean the sort of hole which finally sinks it. They cannot explain pressure and impact themselves. They cannot dispense with actio in distans. They have lost faith in their own ability to explain, and admit with a scowl that they can really only describe, and that the dynamic world interpretation, with its denial of empty space and granular atoms, will soon hold sway over physicists. At this point, of course, they will have to attribute to the dynamis an inner quality. 619. The victorious notion force, by which our physicists have removed God from the world, still needs to be completed. An inner world must be ascribed to it, which I describe as a will to power, i.e., as an insatiable desire to demonstrate one's power, or to apply and exercise it, as a creative impulse, etc. Physicists find the principle of action at a distance indispensable. They find the force of attraction and repulsion no less so. It can't be helped. One must regard all motion, all phenomena, all laws as symptoms of an internal event, and do so by taking man as an analogy. It is possible to derive all the instincts of an animal from the will to power, and likewise all the functions of organic life from this one source. 620. Has the existence of force ever been established? No, only effects translated into a completely foreign language. Regularity of succession has so spoilt us that we no longer wonder at the wondrous process. 621. A force which we cannot imagine is an empty word, and has no standing in science. Like the so-called purely mechanical forces of attraction and repulsion, they are intended to make the world intelligible, nothing more. 622. Compression and impact are something inexpressibly recent, derivative, and thus not primordial. They presuppose something which coheres and can cause compression and impact. But how does it cohere? 623. Philosophy. There is nothing immutable in chemistry. This is only an illusion, a mere scholastic prejudice. To my esteemed colleagues in physics, I say, we introduced the notion of immutability. taking it from metaphysics as usual. It is quite naive to assert merely on the basis of observation that diamond, graphite, and carbon are identical, for no better reason than that no loss of matter can be detected by weight. Admittedly, they have something in common, but this does not alter the fact that the transformation, the molecular work which we can neither see nor weigh, produces from the initial material something different, with specifically different properties. 624. Against the physical atom. In order to understand the world, we must be able to quantify it. In order to be able to quantify it, we must have constant causes. But since we have no such constant causes in reality, we invent some, the atoms. This is the origin of atomism. The ability to quantify the world and express everything in formulae, is that really understanding? What would be understood in a piece of music if what were quantifiable and expressible in formulae in it were reckoned? Then the constant causes, things, substances, something unconditional, all invented, and what has been achieved? 625. The mechanical conception of motion is already a translation of the original process into another language, a translation into visual and tactile terms. The conception of the atom, with its distinction between the seat of a driving force and the force itself, rests upon a linguistic distinction derived from our logical and psychological world. We may not be at liberty to change our means of expression, but it should be possible to understand the extent to which they are mere semiotics. It is preposterous to demand an adequate mode of expression. It lies in the very nature of a language, of a means of expression, to express mere relations. The concept truth is absurd. The whole domain of true and false refers to the relations between beings, not to what they are in themselves. Nonsense. There is no such thing as a being in itself. Relations are what constitute beings in the first place, any more than there can be knowledge in itself. (626) Nor can the sensation of force arise from motion. Sensation in general cannot arise from motion. The only evidence in support of a sensation arising from motion is a seeming experience, sensation being generated in something material, the brain, through transmitted motion, the stimuli. But if the sensation has to be generated, wouldn't this show that sensation in the matter does not yet exist at all? So that its emergence would have to be regarded as the creative act of the supervening motion? It is only an hypothesis that matter is devoid of sensation, not something of which we have experience. Sensation, therefore, is a property of matter. Matter is capable of sensation. Do we find that certain material things have no sensations? No, we have only failed to discover any. It is impossible to derive sensation from matter incapable of sensation. Oh, the haste! 627. The notions attraction and repulsion in the purely mechanical senses are complete fictions, mere words. We cannot imagine an attraction without an intention. The desire to seize a thing or to defend ourselves from its influence and repel it, that we understand, that would be an interpretation we might need. In short, the psychological necessity of a belief in causality lies in our inability to imagine an event without an intention. Of course, this says nothing about truth or untruth, the justification of such a belief. The belief in causae stands or falls with the belief in against Spinoza and his causalism. 628. It is an illusion to suppose that something is known when we have a mathematical formula for an event. It is only designated, described, nothing more. 629. If I reduce a regular event to a formula, I facilitate the designation of the whole phenomenon, abbreviate it, etc. This establishes no law, but rather raises the question of why something is repeated here. It is a supposition that the formula represents a complex of initially unknown forces and their discharge. It is quite mythical to suppose in such cases that forces obey laws, so that in consequence of their obedience, the same thing always happens. 630. I am careful not to speak of chemical laws. That smacks of morality. It is more a matter of absolutely determining the relations of power. The stronger becomes master of the weaker to the extent that the latter fails to retain some degree of independence. Here there is no mercy, no quarter, still less any respect for laws. 631. The unalterable sequence of certain appearances does not prove any law, but a relation of power between two or more forces. To say, but it is precisely this relation that remains the same, says nothing more than one and the same force cannot also be another force. It is not a matter of things coming one after another, but rather of things going into each other, a process in which the individual successive moments are not determined as cause and effect. The separation of deeds from doers, of what happens from what makes it happen. The process from something that is not a process but permanent, substance, thing, body, soul, etc. The attempt to comprehend what happens as a sort of displacement and a change of position on the part of a being, of something abiding. This ancient mythology established the belief in cause and effect. Once it had assumed a fixed form in the linguistic grammatical functions.